do that. Be inspired by today's speaker, or today's entertainer, I should say, Peter Sumner. And many of you know him because he is the head piano technician at the Aspen Music Festival and School. But you might not know that Peter was born in Yorkshire, England, and he did a stint as a young man in Bermuda in the financial banking industry. So I was asking Peter about that earlier, and I'm sure he has some fun stories about living in Bermuda. So he's the curator of pianos at Stanford and the head technician for Aspen Music Festival and School. So can you please welcome Peter Sumner?
It's always a good idea to walk through the audience, you know, then I can figure out if I know anybody. And I do, and it's only my second year at Aspen, but I feel like I'm surrounded by family wherever I look, and my family seems to be gaining every week, which is just amazing. I've no idea what I'm going to talk about. I have no clue. I have some notes here, but somebody told me to write them on really small bits of paper. And then the writing becomes really small, and then you have to put them out the end of your arm like that, so it's really impossible to read them. So I have a really hard time talking, thinking, and speaking at the same time. So if ever you see me looking at notes, it's because I'm saying something that I don't know what I'm talking about. So I refer to notes. Before we get started, we're going to have some music, and this is very, very special music. Played on this piano, which is a brand new Model O from the New York factory of Steinway & Sons. And so would you please, where is she? Where's my pianist? Oh, you're there, great. Would you welcome someone who's going to play a piece of music which you are going to find absolutely riveting? Would you welcome Yulan Ji, please? You know, it's a mystery to me how people can do that. I mean, what I'm now waiting for is for Bela Fleck to do that on the banjo. You know, by the way, I don't know whether you saw that anything fall off the piano during that, but I picked up these little things off the floor. I said, this is the inside of the piano, and there's a hole in the bottom, and they all fell through. So you can pass these around. They're quite expensive. They're about $12 a piece, you know, and so I bought them with my pocket money. And so what we've got here is the inside of the piano. I'm going to get inside there in a bit and show you how they all work. And you can pass them around, but I will need them back because I have to sell them to pay for my bus fare back to San Francisco. So where are we? Well, shall I sit down? I feel so silly sitting in this thing here. So we try it. I could get to like this, actually. But my notes are over here, which is quite embarrassing. So I think what we'll do, rather than tell you how a piano works, which is a little like the Monty Python sketch about how to play the flute, right? There's some people here that are nearly as old as me, and so you'll remember Monty Python. The play the flute sketch lasts about 3 seconds. This is how you play the flute. You blow across the hole, and you wiggle your fingers up and down. I mean, if you look at a flute player from more than 20 feet away, that's all they're doing. And so the same thing for a piano. Really, you press a key down, and by all kinds of magical gubbins, which are consisting of the things that you have in your hand, the hammer will hit the string, and people make music, and it's as simple as that. But it's a lot more complicated than that. And the genesis of the piano is, I think, one of those strokes of genius that it's one of those inventions that was inevitable. You know, you look at the iPad, you look at the iPhone, you look at the steam engine. It's almost like cometh the hour, cometh the man. You know what I mean? It was inevitable. It's an inevitable invention. And before I start taking the thing to pieces and showing you inside, which I think you will enjoy, I want to take you back to 1695, which is a while ago, and none of us were there. So what happened in the genesis of the instrument is kind of lost in the mists of time. There was nobody sending texts. There was certainly no way to record things other than the scribes who could write, made notes. And we're talking about 1695. And I have to just refer to this because the things that were going on in 1695, just to put this into perspective, England had just invented the window tax. So it meant that was a way for government to tax you on the number of windows that you had. So everybody went around and took their windows out and bricked them up. So the window tax. St. Paul's Cathedral was just starting to get built. The first patent for the steam engine, same period. Peter the Great, who we all know and love, put a tax on beards, which I found quite offensive personally. Closer to home, there was a magnitude 9 earthquake, the Cascadia earthquake off the northwest coast of the United States. Fort Pontchartrain trading post had just been created. Does anybody know what Fort Pontchartrain became? Detroit. See? I know because it's written down here. Puts it into perspective, William III died in England and he was succeeded by Mary Stuart, all that lovely history stuff. And British troops had a great time plundering, St. Augustine in Florida. I mean, this is the time we're talking about, 1695 to 1705. And so there was this guy in Florida. No, it wasn't in Florida. No, where was he? No, he was in Florence. It sounds like Florida. It begins with FL, and it's very similar. So I got confused there for a minute. Florence, Bartolomeo Cristofori. And he worked for the Medici family there. And he was a harpsichord maker, and a very, very good harpsichord maker. In fact, the Medicis were, if you like, the Bill Gates of Central and basically Central Europe. The whole of the European continent was basically supported by the money, a lot of the money from the Medici family for the arts. And so Cristofori was, however you pronounce it, was working for the Medicis. Great harpsichord player and maker. And you've got to say to yourself, what was the confluence? What were the reasons why the piano was invented? And why was this guy the right guy? Why was this guy the Steve Jobs of his day? Which I believe he was. And I believe he's a real unsung hero. I think there needs to be a book about him and a movie, and I think Mr. Isaacson should sort of lead the way there. Don't you think? I think it would be a nice project for him. So let's think, what was extant at the time as far as keyboard instruments were concerned? Okay, you had the organ, and that's usually nailed down to the floor in the church, and you can't really pick it up and take it into your living room and play Abide With Me. It just wouldn't work, it's just too big. So then what do you have? You've got the clavichord, which is about this by this. I don't know whether you know how a clavichord works, and I'm not going to get technical, because, I can't, But you press down the key. At the other end of the key, there's a brass thing sticking up with the end shaped like the end of a screwdriver. So the key goes down, the brass thing goes up, hits the string, dong, and stays in contact with the string. You release the key, and the note stops. It's the only keyboard instrument that you can play vibrato on. Think about it. You'll see concert pianists all the time going, getting into their stuff and going, oh, yeah, wonderful. Doesn't do a thing. I mean, the hammer's way gone by then. It's gone, hit the string, come back down, and they're doing this. But they enjoy it, so just let them do it. But it doesn't create anything musical. But it's a visual spectacle that I really enjoy and chuckle a lot when I see that. So the clavichord, so it hits the string, and you can vibrate it. And it's lovely. It's dynamic. You get a bit of loud and soft with it, but you can't hear it from 8 feet away. I mean, literally, it's that quiet. Bach did a lot of composing on it. Where are we going to go? We got that's not going anywhere. You can't do anything with that. And then you've got the harpsichord, of course. Now, the harpsichord works on the pluck principle. And so you've got, I'll put these notes somewhere. You've got the key, you've got the fulcrum in the middle, you press this end, the other end goes up and down. At the end that goes up and down, the far end, you've got a jack, which is a wooden piece that goes up and down in a rack, and there's one for each note. On that jack, there is a quill that sticks out like that. And this is the string, and you go dong, the thing goes up and goes plong, and then it comes down, and there's a hinge. And the hinge comes back. So when you hear the release of a harpsichord, you hear that secondary noise. You hear the noise of the note, then you hear a ting, click. Well, that's the plectrum coming down. No matter how hard you try, you cannot pluck loud or soft. A pluck is a pluck. really, basically, with a very narrow band of dynamic range. Very narrow indeed. So what are you going to do? And why is it that keyboard players were kind of getting a bit antsy? Because all they've got is either they go to the church and play the organ, they go and play the clavichord in their living room, or they go and play the harpsichord, neither of which are giving them the musical satisfaction. So why are they getting irritated? Well, you've got a guy about 120 miles up the freeway from Florence there in Cremona, and he's called Tony Strad, and he's making these fiddles exactly the same time that Cristofori is building his harpsichords and developing the idea of the piano. So there's Stradivari up in Cremona, 1695 to 1700, just entering what they call the golden period of Stradivari, which is when he starts to make his violins a little bit longer, a little bit deeper. And so why is he doing that? Why suddenly everybody wants to get a little bit more oomph? Stradivari later reverts back to his older models. But this golden period, 1695 to sort of 1720, was when everybody was wanting a little bit more. So why? Flutes had just come in. Flutes were getting rid of the recorders. Woodwind and brass instruments were starting to get keys. The proletariat was starting to make music. The music wasn't just behind the walls of the church. It was becoming the people's music. People were getting so that they wanted music. So what was there available, and why was Cristofori in a great place to be able to pull it all together? Okay, we've mentioned the Medicis. They had a huge collection of antique instruments going back to the 14th century. Folk instruments, classical instruments, lutes, you name it, viols, you name it, they had everything. And Cristofori was right there. And so he had all of these things at his disposal. And one instrument that is a little bit maligned in the classical field, but is very much thought of in the folk music field, is something called the hammered dulcimer. You may well be familiar with the hammered dulcimer in North America, particularly if you like Appalachian music, particularly Appalachian dance music. So the American version of the Appalachian dulcimer, as opposed to the Appalachian mountain dulcimer, which is the one that you pluck and play with a quill and noter, the hammered dulcimer is trapezoid with any number of strings depending on who made it, and any size depending on who made it. And you hit them with small wooden hammers with a piece of felt or leather at the end, and you can play wonderfully. There are no dampers, so the thing is ringing, so you get a lovely ethereal sound. And I've got a little note here about the dulcimer that I just need to refer to. The word dulcimer comes from the Latin and the Greek. You all knew that, of course. And Latin, dulcis, and the Greek is melos, so sweet song. So that's what the dulcimer, the hammered dulcimer, or the dulcimer was known as a sweet song. So in Europe, the forerunner of the dulcimer came from a number of different places. Eastern Europe, Hungary, had the cimbalom, huge, great big thing. And in India and in the Middle East, as we think of now, it was the santur, the same thing. Now, the thing that this instrument has above anything that they're playing with the keyboard at that point is that it's dynamic. The louder you hit the string, or the more force you give the string, the louder the sound. The quieter you hit the string, the softer the sound. So I like to think of the piano as the golden haired offspring of a harpsichord and a dulcimer. I've no idea when the union took place, but it would have been rather noisy, I imagine. And the result is the piano. So how come, what was the big thing that made Cristofori think of these two coming together? Well, my idea, I guess it isn't my own idea, but it seems to be the general thought that around 1692 there was this amazing instrument that appeared in Europe called the Pantaleon Hebenstreit. Now, not a lot of people know that, right? So, has anybody ever heard of the Pantaleon Hebenstreit before? Wow, isn't that good? Do you know what it is? No, it sounds like a rock band from the 1960s, doesn't it? You know, Jethro Tull and the Pantaleon Hebenstreit. Both named after, you know, something. I mean, Jethro Tull, obviously, the agricultural workers' revolt and all that sort of stuff. But so, Pantaleon Hebenstreit. I mean, where did that come from? But what it was this dirty, great big dulcimer that they drove around in a truck. No, they couldn't have driven around in no, how did they get it from? They put it in a cart, or they got, yeah. It was 9 feet long with 200 strings. I must take a drink of water because I'm getting so excited. I'm getting a dry throat thinking about the Hebenstreit being 9 feet long. So the Pantaleon Hebenstreit is a dulcimer, 9 feet long with 200 strings that you hit with hammers. Who knew? You guys never heard of it, right? But it existed. 1692, German, I think. The Mersberg was the inventor, so I've been told. But what happened in 1695? Well, he was driving down the freeway from the middle of Germany, and he just saw the sign for Florence, and he thought, oh, that sounds really good. The people had said it's good. So he drove into Florence on his cart and dumped his Hebenstreit right in the middle of the marketplace, Pantaleon Hebenstreit, and started playing tunes. And what happened is everybody gets texting, come on, Bartolomeo, get down to the marketplace. There's this big geezer with this 9-foot-long dulcimer called the Pantaleon Hebenstreit, and it sounds amazing. It plays loud and it plays soft, and who knew? You know, all his keyboard piano-playing friends that couldn't be piano-playing friends because it hadn't been invented then, harpsichord playing friends. So I'm making this up as I go along. You can tell, can't you? So, so there was this huge dulcimer sitting in the middle of Florence. He's got to have seen it. He's got to have known it was there. He had to have done. I mean, he was interested in musical instruments. He made harpsichords, and this thing appears. So I think that somehow he had this idea that you could take the hammers that are being hit like that and make a mechanical device that would propel those hammers from underneath. And so what he did was, he took the harpsichord, basically intact. He hardly changed a thing, he just added something. So remember the jack that we were talking about with the little prong on the end that went pling, 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 right? He kept that because it's going up and down, and he put a piece of felt on it. And he took the quill off. So it would go up, and when it came down, it would dampen the string. And then all he had to do then, easy, is make a mechanism that would propel the hammer to the string, would allow it to escape without bouncing, would get ready for the next shot, and have repetition. I mean, a pretty big invention. And I don't know quite how long it was and how many tries he had to get it right. But somewhere between 1695 and 1700, he managed to get it right. There are 3 of his instruments extant right now in the museum. Well, there's one in Florence, and there are a couple of others made around about 1720. And it's interesting, this period of evolution, you wonder how many tries he had to actually make it work, right? Because he made it out of whole cloth. There was nothing else that existed. The nearest analogy I can think of is Preparation H. Now, if you think of Preparation H, there must have been a Preparation A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, but we have no idea what happened to the people that tried preparation A. But there is a reason why it moved on to preparation H, and that is the one that, so in other words, I would call that natural evolution. So at some point, I've no clue how he did it, but this harpsichord maker managed to manufacture a piece of kit that when you press the key down, it propelled a hammer to the string. The hammer was covered in leather, and it made the note. When he released the key, the old jack that used to sit in the harpsichord with a bit of felt on it came down, and it stopped. And then people found that they could play it, hit it hard, and it would be loud. They played it quiet, and they said, well, that instrument there plays piano and forte. Let me see. Sounds like that would be a really good name for a musical instrument, wouldn't it? The pianoforte. So what they did was, that was it. That was basically the genesis of the piano. You know, in my mind. I mean, it might not have happened like that, but I like to think it happened like that. I mean, I can't think of any other way that it did happen. And so there we have it. We have the piano was invented. And then, you know, we can kind of jump 100 years, really, because not an awful lot went on in that period. Well, it did, but I don't know what it was, so I can't tell you. But just think of that period. You've got Bartolomeo Cristofori making a piano. You've got Tony Stradivari up in Cremona making the best violins that have ever existed. And you say to yourself, wow, that must have been an idyllic environment there. You know, the birds would be singing, he'd be walking in his garden, he'd be going rowing down the river in his canoe, and he'd be, you know, making stuff. No. Are there any historians here? The 9 Years' War and the Spanish War of Succession was ripping Europe apart from 1795 to about 1820. The naughty boy was King Louis XIV, the Sun King. To call him a megalomaniac is a little bit understatement, I think, but he was basically ripping Europe apart. And he was based in France, of course, and so he was making war with everybody. And they finally figured out 9 years was long enough for a war, so they stopped. And then they had a problem with the succession in Spain, and then that started another one, and then they had another war for about 14 years. So all this time when Stradivari is building the best violins on the planet, and a man is creating a piano from whole cloth, Europe is at war. And to me, I find that absolutely fascinating. So what happened was that Mr. Cristofori was interviewed by, I think it was CNN or somebody like that, and they said, "Do you mind if we take some photographs of your invention?" And he said, "Sure, and we'll do diagrams as well because photographs hadn't been invented, you know." So they did some diagrams. Round about 1715, I think it was. So there was this writer called Scipione Maffei, and I think he worked for CNN, and he wrote this thing about Cristofori, how he made the piano, all the pictures of his diagrams and of his invention. And nothing much happened until they actually translated it into German. And then all hell broke loose, because all of these guys that were equally getting frustrated that their pianos wouldn't play loud and soft because they didn't have a piano. They had nothing to play loud and soft. They all wanted to make something, and they saw this, and they all started making them. And that was the point where the cat got out of the bag. And everybody who wanted to make one of these things, all the harpsichord makers, started making pianos. The best harpsichord makers in the world started making pianos. And a very famous one went to London, Burkhard Schutte, and married John Broadwood's daughter. And the firm of John Broadwood was formed in the early to mid 1700s. And they started making pianos in England directly because of the influence of a harpsichord maker who came from Germany and had seen these diagrams that Cristofori had produced. And then the English went on to produce their own kind of mechanism. It was much bigger, much more like the Royal Oak. You know, they were really strongly built pianos, as opposed to the European models, which are much lightly built. Skip forward 100 years, and you end up with, around about 1800 to 1820, the development of the forte piano as we know it these days, which runs parallel with the pianoforte, but they are built incredibly differently inside. The forte pianos come from what you call the Viennese school, where the hammers don't go this way to hit the string, they go that way to hit the strings. And a number of very, very fine makers came out of that period. One was called Stein, and his daughter, Nanette, married Mr. Streicher. And whether you can believe it or not, but in the 1820s, one of the best piano makers in Europe was Nanette Streicher. And she was one of Brahms' favorite piano makers. I mean, who knew, really? I am very lucky that I have a Streicher piano at Stanford that I bought. But it's a late period, it's like 1867. But anyway, I have a Streicher, and I'm very happy of that. And so there's another maker called Walter, and these are the models of the forte pianos which are being produced now. The modern makers of the forte piano are using copies of Stein, Streicher, and Walter. So basically they got it right in 1820. Now then what happens? The old steam engine that got its patent back in the early part of the 1700s have been trundling along, and the Industrial Revolution, the sort of the natural growth of human ingenuity. What was the result of the Industrial Revolution as far as the piano was concerned? A couple of things. No longer did you need to have the wire made out of iron. You could make it out of steel. No longer did you have to have a wooden frame. Like all the pianos prior to the Industrial Revolution, there may be a bit of iron, but there was no steel because it hadn't been invented. So you had steel castings for the frame, the plate, and you had steel wire for the strings, which meant that ultimately you could get the tension up to 20 tons. The tension on that piano there is 20 tons, and it's been about 20 tons since about the 1860s, all due to the Industrial Revolution. So what happened between 1820 and 1860? Everybody starts making pianos in Europe. Bluthner, Bösendorfer, Bechstein, and Sauter. Some very ancient names who are still making pianos to this day started making pianos right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Germany, right about 1820 to 1840. And then about this time, there were a couple of guys in Seesen in Germany who knocked out a piano in their kitchen. And they thought, this is really good. And their last name was Steinway. Steinweg, excuse me. They were Steinweg. And basically one thing led to another, and again, due to the wars, I mean, Europe just loves wars. I have no clue why, but they do, and they're still doing it. And back then, there were a lot of wars going on in the early 1800s. And the whole Steinway family said, enough already. And they went and caught a bus, and they went to somewhere, and they got a boat, and they ended up in New York. And they founded Steinway and Sons in 1850. Ron Losby's going to kill me. I think it's 1856. And they started making pianos in New York, as did Chickering, started before them. So New York was, Steinway pianos are a New York piano created by Germans who emigrated. 25, 30 years later, they went back to Germany and built the Hamburg factory. So Steinway is not a German company, it's an American company, which, again, some people aren't too sure about that, but it's an absolute fact. That's the way it happened. So Chickering at the same time were making these pianos, and Steinway were making these pianos, and they had this great rivalry, and there's this great exhibition of 1860, I think it was, when they were all kind of trying to get the badges, you know, that they stick on the soundboards, you know, and they were almost at blows, Mr. Chickering and Mr. Steinway. Yeah, we make better pianos than you. Oh, no, you don't. And at the same time this was happening in America, they're still making pianos in Europe, of course, in Germany particularly, and in France, Erard, Pleyel. In England, you've got Challen and Chappell and Broadwood. But what happened in America is, because America was created from whole cloth, all your buildings in New York were created from whole cloth. Europe, their instruments were being played in buildings that were built in the Renaissance and before. Small rooms, low ceilings. Didn't need big pianos because they weren't filling big spaces. So what happens is, in New York, when they start building these big buildings, they have big rooms. So Steinway particularly, I think, I need to say this because I'm really a Steinway fan. I know all the guys at the factory, and I'm as committed to them as I am to anything on the planet. They got the idea that, well, let's use our engineering skills and the science and the math that we know, and they spoke to the right people, and they got the engineering right, and it continues to this day. But Steinway and Sons are the guys that actually created the piano that we know today with the power that it has, and that was all out of the necessity to make pianos fill the new rooms in North America. And it's also a way why Hamburg instruments and New York instruments kind of grew, well, like this. But then you have World War I, you have World War II, and the Brits bombed the crap out of Hamburg, and the whole factory is destroyed. And then they have to retool and rebuild, and still they develop a little bit like this. But now they're coming together through my good friend, the president of Steinway, Ron Losby, who did 7 years in Europe at the London showrooms and basically ran Europe for Steinway. He's now back in New York, been back 7 years, American. And he's now brought Hamburg Steinway and New York Steinway much closer than they have ever been. And so they're almost indistinguishable. So that's a big jump to that from Cristofori. But we're eating up time, and I'm talking about history, which I don't really know very much about. All I know is what I've read. All I know is what I've tried to analyze myself, and I'm just trying to share it with you so you can go and read Wikipedia just like I did, and make your own minds up as to the genesis of the instrument. But basically, that's the long and short of it. There's a lot of stuff that happened in between, a lot of developments that were made in the mechanism. Those pieces of mechanism that you have there in your hands were created around about 1830, 1840, and there are a number of individuals who created that, and then Steinway said, that looks like a good idea, I think we'll steal that. And they took that mechanism, used it in their own instruments, and it's exactly the same mechanism that they have now, that they had in their pianos in 1860, 1870. Same thing. So what I think I'll do, we're going to have some questions. I'm sure there are some questions. In fact, I've planted several people in the audience to give me some questions. But what I thought I might do, because this always gets a nice ooh, pardon my back, but I can't do it like this. I have to turn around and do it. So to get an action out of a Steinway, we have a GoPro so you can see. So we've got this thing here called the key slip, which comes up like that. Who knew? A couple of screws, a couple of slots, no screws, there it is, gone. Easy. Now what do we do next? Well, because Steinways don't want anybody mucking around with their pianos, they don't have a turnbuckle, you've got to have a pretty big screwdriver and pretty decent muscles. And then you undo that there. Screw number one. And by mere coincidence, there's one the other side. Who knew? And let's take that out. Oh, God, you're getting a real close-up of me there, aren't you? Luckily, I can't see it. Remind me to have a shave tomorrow. So, it still works. Good. So, this is how you get the action out of a Steinway. You go like that, like that. You go like that. You go like that. You throw this bit of stuff away over there. And then you do this. This is the part I like. Now, before I do this, let me just tell you, I'll pull it out. What was that? Something fell off? No, good, right. What was it? Oh, it was a cup. Oh, good. Because when you're pulling an action out of a Steinway like this, the last thing you want to hear is a noise. You know what I mean? So, back in the day, when I didn't really know anything, well, a little less than I know now, I was at a seminar for technicians aspiring to be Steinway techs. There were about 15 of us in the room, and we were sitting in this, I think I was in Los Angeles somewhere. And so there were 2 or 3 of the Steinway techs from New York were there. And I was having a great time. I mean, man, I was really in my element. And so they go, right, who knows how to take an action out of a Steinway? Right. So what's that? I did never volunteer for anything, right? Not me. Yeah, I can do that. So I knew how to do all this stuff, and I knew how to. So I starts pulling it out, and then I hear this noise, crack. But I kept on pulling. My heart was in my mouth, because you know what I thought I was going to find. I thought I was going to find that one of these had broken, because you can imagine there's like an 1/8 of an inch gap there, right? You can kind of see that, right? Imagine if you have anything pressing the keys down when you do that, right? What a horrible thought. So the hammer's up like that, it's up that side, you pull it out with your hand on the keys, and you lose the hammer. You get a snap. I thought that's what I'd done, but I'd been very careful. But no. It was one of these guys from Steinway at the back of the room with a pencil. So, even to this day, the trauma is with me. And so every time I pull, I make sure my sleeves are rolled up. I make sure I don't, tie's not there, nothing's touching it. Yet occasionally, you still do it, because it's there to do, so you do it. But there you go. So, wow, indeed, that mechanism was designed in around about 1840, 1850, Steinways refined it, and that's what you've got now. Various people have tried making bits out of different things other than that you see there, which is all wood and leather, though nowadays it's in synthetic leather, and felt, and a spring there, the repetition spring. But everything is wood. There was a day when they were trying plastics out, but plastic and wood have different coefficients of expansion, do not work. Wood and wood have worked well together. So they haven't managed to change that. So there you go. I'm going to press the key down, and you can see that. Can you all see that hammer going up and down, right? Okay, that isn't much different from Mr. Cristofori, other than this part here. This part here is a compound lever. All those physicists amongst you will know what a compound lever is. So a compound lever gives us the ability to press down 10 millimeters, and the hammer goes up 50 millimeters. You've got about a 10-to-1 ratio. If you didn't have the compound lever, the key would have to be 4 feet long, 5 feet long. So that is it. That is it. That's how a hammer hits the string. Bump, like that. But keep your eye on the mechanism. I'm going to hit it hard. It's gone into check. Ready for its next shot. Look at the jack here. That is what propelled this piece northwards. So now look what happens now when I release the key. I'm going to release the key, and what happens is the hammer, who knew? The hammer goes up. What is that jack? And the jack goes right back under to do another one. That is the beauty of this action. It's a repetition action. You can play this. I mean, if ever if you saw Vladimir Feldsman last night, if you're going to see him tonight at 8 o'clock, they can repeat, I don't know how many notes a second. But that's it. That's the whole beauty of the mechanism of a grand piano. You release the key, watch my thumb, key is releasing, the hammer goes up, I'll do it again. Hammer goes up at the same time, jack goes back underneath, and it's ready to fire again. And it's ready to fire again, and the hammer isn't halfway down. In the old days, the hammer had to get all the way down to the bottom, and back in the day, there would have been a piece of felt here that was actually engaged with the bottom of the shank, and it would rest on the shank. And as it rested on the shank, it would give this mechanism a chance to get back underneath. This is the spring. This is the wishbone spring here, there, that does the work. It propels, that is called the balancier. That is the piece of wood that holds the hammer, and this jack here is what propels it to the string. So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. That's your grand piano action. And the thing about this is it's capable of the ultimate nuance in touch, in rapidity of repetition. The weight of the key is adjustable by means of weights in the keys or by altering the density of the hammer felt or the size of the hammer head. And so you can produce the best down weight that you can think of from this design. It'll do everything. I can't think of anything that was invented around the mid-1800s that we're using in our daily lives every day at the highest possible professional level. I mean, maybe the pencil? I mean, can you think of anything mechanical? The steam engine, but you don't see one of those rolling down Main Street every day. So this thing is working as well as it worked in the 1870s at the highest level, and they haven't improved it. So there's the challenge. I know there are scientists out here. There have to be. So there's your challenge, all right? Try to design a piano mechanism that plays better than one that was designed in the 1850s and 60s. I'll put this together later. But I needed to... We've got a couple of minutes for questions, but I just have to tell you this story because, I better stand up, you can't see me. I'll sit down. It's nice telling this story to a bunch of scientists. About 15 years ago, I was working in Berkeley and getting a reputation amongst some of the piano teachers, and they liked what I did. And one of them said to me one day, well, there's this fella at the top of Grizzly Peak. He's got a really nice house, and he's a very interesting character, and he wants some work doing on his piano. I think you'll really enjoy meeting him. His wife's an artist. So I've not been long out of northern England, right? I live in a house the size of a shoebox. Most of you guys have got fridges bigger than my house was in England. So there I am on Grizzly Peak. If you know Grizzly Peak above Berkeley, and I drive up the hill. He gives me the address. My buddy Chip gives me the address. So I drive up the hill. There's this amazing edifice of a house, modern, concrete, just staggering. I finally find the front door. Knock on the front. Yeah, I mean, it's like, my house in San Francisco, you know where the front door is. It's right at the front of the house. It's because the house is like this wide, It couldn't be anywhere else. So I knock on the door, and this lovely lady about my age comes to the door. Oh, Peter, yeah, Chip told me all about you. My husband's dying to meet you, and come in. So go in, this massive room about half the size of this, full of canvases about 10 by 10. Amazing art that she'd done. And this place is like a big art gallery. And there's this piano right in the middle of the room. She said, that's my husband's office in the corner. He's working right now, and he'll hear you, because, yeah, you'll hear me tuning all right. He'll come out. He's very interested in the piano, I said, oh, I'd love to talk to him. That'd be great. So I get donging away, and it's a pretty horrible process, tuning a piano. It just sounds really bad, just really bad. But after half an hour, the door opens, and this older guy walks across. Lovely, lovely face, very gentle, kind eyes, magic kind of a person. And I introduced myself, and he said, oh, it's the piano. He said, I play a little bit, and I've played the viola in my day. I said, oh, yeah. I said, is there anything that you'd like to know about the piano? He said, well, you tell me what you know. Clue number one. His name was not Cristofori, so you can all relax there. But so I said, well, it's an amazing thing. The tension, you've got 20 tons of tension, and you've got this thing, depending on the length of the piano, whether it's 5 foot or 8 foot, you've got a thing called inharmonicity. I didn't really know what it was, but it sounded really good. You've got inharmonicity in the strings, and that can affect the tone. And then you've got the scale design of the piano, which is the diameter of the wire in relation to the length of the string, in relation to the actual note that is played. And that's why the piano isn't 15 feet long. They've compromised on a lot of stuff to get it into a small cabinet, and so there are compromises. So some strings have to be really thick to get the same amount of mass into 4 feet. If it was 8 feet, it would be half the thickness. Are you with me so far? You're a scientist, of course you are. So I did all this sort of stuff, and he said, thank you. It was really interesting. And he shook my hand and went back to his office. So about 3 weeks later, I was back in Berkeley, and I went to my buddy Chip, the piano teacher, and he said, did you go and see my buddy Don? I said, yeah, I met his wife. It was fantastic. I said, I gave him my elevator pitch about what I know about the physics of the piano, and he was really interested, and he's shook my hand, and Chip literally fell off his chair. He had tears rolling down his cheeks. He was holding his stomach. I said, what? He said, do you know who that was? I said, God, no. His wife's an artist, and he lives in this brilliant house, top of Grizzly Peak, He said, that was Don Glaser. Nobel Prize in Physics in 1960. But he was very kind. Unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago. And but that was my realization that now luckily we have Google. So when we have some wonderful scientists in the room. We have some colleagues from Berkeley here who, it's always a good idea to Google your clients before you get there, right? Just in case. But anyway, that's my story. I kind of missed a lot out because, you've seen how a piano works. Luckily, we have a GoPro. That GoPro can say more in 10 seconds than I could in 1,000 words. It's a privilege to be here talking to you. It's a privilege to work for Aspen. It's an absolute privilege to work for Stanford. I enjoy what I do more than I can explain. It isn't like a job. It's just what I do. So I'm happy to throw it out to questions. If anybody, can we go a bit longer? Anybody have a bus to catch or anything like that? No? I mean, there's Vladimir Feltzman out there waiting for me to go and tune his piano, but he was happy with it last night, so why the hell wouldn't he be happy with it tonight? He's a really nice guy, actually, and he was very complimentary about my work, so I'm happy to let him, he's fine. He'll be good. So who's got, I have a question. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I noticed it seemed as if all the felts were the same shape in the Steinway.
You talking about the hammers?
The hammers.
Yeah.
Yes. We have an old Knabe, and some of them are triangles and some of
You mean the bit that hits the string? Well, you could either have had a really creative piano technician, or you've got a very unusual design, because really the hammers have to be kind of elliptical, the shape of the top of a pear, if you like, and then they get kind of fatter in the base. And then you want very little felt hitting the string. They get square like that when they get worn out. So without seeing it, I'm mystified, but I'd like to meet your technician. Yes, sir.
Yes. At the beginning, you passed around those.
Yeah, they've gone somewhere.
So, where the lever is this little round object. It looks like an electronic piece or something.
Oh, where's that? On which piece? Who stole my stuff?
They're all in the back.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Let's find out what the question is. A little round piece. On which? See? Yeah, there you go.
Where is it? This thing right here.
Okay,
What does it do?
that piece there adjusts the angle of the jack. So if you screw that screw out, the jack will move further out. And that's so it aligns with the other top piece of the mechanism. And the reason it's got a piece of felt on the end is because it hits a piece of metal. If it didn't have the felt, it would click. So a lot of felt in a piano action and leather in a piano action is there to stop friction, to stop two parts hitting together. Good, that was an easy one. I'll do the front row. Got easy ones on the front row. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll stand up so people can hear me. I'm not an expert, I'm a physicist.
Oh, no. Did you know Don Glaser?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Oh.
For a while.
Oh, my goodness.
I read that each of the hammers hits usually 3 strings.
In the treble section, yes.
Yeah, okay. Now, I've also read that they aren't tuned in unison. Why?
Because they're really bad tuners. No. Okay, so every note in the treble section from here to here has three pieces of wire. Those 3 pieces of wire are the way I tune anyway for concert work, are absolutely tuned absolutely together. The anomaly can occur if you haven't done your homework as a technician and say one string is slightly higher than the other, which because of metal has a memory, right? You have to persuade it to go somewhere, and then you have to persuade it again in a bit to stay there. The hammer can hit, and then it can hit the 2 outside strings and then hit the middle string. And all you physicists know what happens then. You get phase interference, you get an increase in the noise and a decrease in the signal. I left school at 16, so I don't know why I know this stuff, but I do. So what happens then? It gives the illusion that there's a problem with the hammer. So technicians then go in and start needling the hammer. Oh, we'll get rid of that noise, all right. But still the strings are not level. And so what they've done by softening the hammer up, they've basically dumbed the thing down, and the thing's lost all of its energy, and so you don't hear the noise. But you've lost all your power, you've lost all your energy. And so, but when I tune using an iPhone with a $1,000 application. I'm 65 years old and my hearing isn't as good as it was when I was 40. I cannot tune orally to service Vladimir Felsman, Conrad Tao, Marc-Andre Hamelin. Who am I kidding? So I use an app. It's a very, very good app. And that tells me to tune every single wire. I mean, I've got the spinner going so fast, and when it goes like that and it wobbles, that's as in tune as any human being can get that note in tune. The trick is getting the 3 exactly the same, and that's where the skill comes in. The skill comes in also is having it in tune at the end of rack 3 as it is at the beginning of rack 3. And that's all to do with the body mechanics, manipulation of the tuning pin, stuff that you can't teach a technician in 5 minutes, it takes 5 years. The 10,000 hours thing is really to do with making the thing stay in tune. But yes,
You didn't answer the part about why 3 strings.
well, through power.
Okay.
There were originally 2 and then 3.
Okay.
Now, there are tuners in Europe who do slightly tune the unison slightly out of phase, because it can give a slightly more interesting sound, but it has to be super controlled. I mean, you can imagine if you think 3 absolutely perfectly sounding strings can sound a bit bland, well, I mean, I can't imagine that they do, but some people perceive that they do, and they go, well, let me just give that right-hand unison a bit of a tweak. And so you get so on the unison, you get a bit of movement on the single note. You can hear that bit of movement. That might warm up some music, particularly if you're not using equal temperament. If you're using one of the ancient tuning schemes, or even something like Lou Harrison liked to work with, something like a synthetic tuning, non-standard, will create a musical effect. But most concert pianists I know like to work at A440, 41, 42, 43, and like to have everything buttoned up, tight and solid. And as we're talking about tuning, I tune using the computer, but the computer I tell it what I want it to spit back at me. So I kind of program it. And what you do is you tune where you roll off. You kind of slightly flatten the bass, slightly. And then you start sharpening slightly the octaves. Franz Mohr, who was Horowitz's technician, refers to getting a perfect unison. And I spent a couple of days with him once. They were a couple of the best days of my life. And I go, how do you get that stretch, Franz? He says, well, you get it perfect, and then you give it a little shine. And it's slightly widened. I said, but how do you do that on, all the way? He says, that is the question. And you learn to do it. But now I do it synthetically. I'm going to work my way back. Yes?
Do you tune differently for Felsman, Tau,
No.
Barnard?
No.
Where do you just get it into?
I tune equal temperament with the stretch that's programmed. The only change I would make if I tuned on a shorter instrument, I would give it slightly less stretch. But most of my work is on 9-foots, and that works best. No, I never do anything other than that. Yeah. Excuse me?
It's about soundboards.
Soundboards, sure. Yeah.
Are they made of different materials, or is it wood? Is it metal?
Soundboards. People are starting to experiment with carbon fiber. Because, wood's running out, and good wood is running out even faster than bad wood. The soundboard on a Steinway is made out of something about that thick, tapered towards the edges. It has a crown, just like the top of a violin. And that's held there by the shape of the ribs that are underneath. And so you can, in fact, next year I'm hoping we can show the movie note by note and bring Ron Losby, President Steinway, here to do a Q&A, and we can do all that kind of manufacturing stuff. But yes, it's spruce for the most part, and then depending on whether in Europe it could be Engelmann spruce or it could be somewhere in Bavaria, Fazioli. Mr. Paolo Fazioli bought the forest. He bought the forest where Strad used to go and chop down his trees. And so he makes his Faziolis from a specific genus of spruce found on the west slope of some mountain range in Bavaria. So I'm going to work down this way. Excuse me. Yeah.
Would you tell us a little bit about the pedal and the introduction of the pedal?
Oh, the pedals. Oh, man, we need 3 hours for the pedals. Are we doing okay? Are we doing okay? Do we have to go? What's the consensus? Is there a bus coming to take you all? Oh, Felsman. He's going to play the same stuff as last night. He's going. Yeah, we're going to have to. The pedals. The left-hand pedal moves the keys left and right. The right-hand pedal is a sustain, and the middle pedal is a sostenuto. The sostenuto is where you press a key down, you hold the sostenuto down, and it will hold that note, and it's still sounding. So that's a sostenuto pedal. I mean, I could talk for the next 3 hours, and I'm sure that some of your questions will be really valuable. But let me do a couple more from this side. The gentleman in the blue shirt. Hamburg and New York, the differences. It's a very good question. There's a lot of legend out there. There's a lot of misinformation. How can I be politically correct? I don't want to be politically correct. The difference between Hamburg and New York. Instruments made in Hamburg, instruments made in New York. Back in the day, Hamburg made their own rims and had mahogany in there, softer woods than maple. And they made their own soundboards, and they just produced a different sound. Don't even think about the mechanism. The actual intrinsic body of the instrument vibrated in a different way. Nowadays, most of what you see in a Hamburg instrument is made in the United States. The rims and the soundboard. The difference now between a Hamburg and a New York is really down to what the hammer is made of and how it's made. It's different. A New York hammer is softer when it's made, and you augment it with lacquer. It's a factory process. There's nothing weird about it. You build the tone. With a Hamburg Renner hammer, specific to Steinway, not any old Renner, it's a Steinway Renner hammer, made to their order. It's very hard, and you have to needle to make a cushion in the hammer so that it doesn't hit hard, so that it's resilient and escapes from the string. And those two approaches fundamentally give you a different sonic landscape. The other thing, that Hamburg were always better made in the finishing process. They have about 7 or 8 guys on the finishing line. It looks like you could eat your breakfast off the underside of it. You know, they were immaculate. New York, well, imagine. I mean, New York guys. So, let's see. Let's compare a Ford F-150 truck with a BMW. Not much difference, right? So, but that's the analogy. The Germans just make it. I mean, really make it. The New Yorkers, well, does it work? Do the keys go up and down? Does it sound? It's great. But they've really improved it a lot over the last 5 years. So there's hardly any difference now. So this man, yes, sir.
Which one would you buy, an L, an F,
Oh, which instrument? Well, if I had a house big enough for a piano, I would. I'd have one of each. I'd have one of each. I'd have a Hamburg and a New York. Then, you know, I mean, really, when it all comes down to it, the piano maker can only do so much. You know, the rest of it is down to the geniuses that play it. You could take that piano or any piano on the planet, put it on this stage, and have 10 pianists play it, and each one would make it sound different. That's got nothing to do with me. It's got nothing to do with the piano, what it's made of, how old it is, who made it. And so it is basically a mechanical musical instrument that guys like me can go around corners really quick and sound really even, powerful, but it's the pianist that makes the music.
And with that, we'll
sorry. I mean,
let you get back to tuning pianos tonight.
But thank you. Thank you. I could have gone.